Hi, I'm Charlie Cook from Allpress UK. Today we're talking to Adam Hyman, founder of The Code, about UK hospitality and what comes after the COVID lockdown. So to kick us off, can you tell us about Code, how it started, and what you guys do?
Thanks for having me on, Charlie. I started Code. Well, it's about 2013, so about 7 years ago, or exactly 7 years ago. And to be honest with you, there was no proper business plan. It was all kind of because I had this kind of weird obsession with restaurants and hospitality. My mother has always worked in the industry, and my father likes going out to restaurants and trying new restaurants and food. So I was fortunate enough to grow up in London and try all these nice restaurants. And when I went traveling as a family on holidays, we'd always go and eat in nice places, and I was just always kind of fascinated. Not so much always about the food, but just about the whole people side of restaurants as well, and that whole buzz, and how you create this atmosphere, and how you look after people. I ended up going down the kind of university route and ended up working in commercial property for a few years in London, which was fine, and it served a purpose. But it was at that time when Polpo was really transitioning, the kind of food scene in London, and Soho was really picking up again as a place to go and eat, and it wasn't so much about kind of formal having to book and have 5 courses and spend lots of money. You could actually go out as a younger person and go and have a Negroni, which kind of no one had probably really heard about until kind of Polpo arrived, and have some small plates and spend 25 quid. And I was working in London then, and I don't know, there was something there was this real buzz about it, and I thought, I really want to work in this industry. And I'd got to know Jeremy King very well. Obviously owns a group of restaurants under Corbin and King, so the Wolsey, Brasserie, Adele, and him and Chris have been kind of some of the best restaurateurs in the world probably over the past 30 years. And it was Jeremy's idea to start our weekly newsletter that we do, called the Code Bulletin, which now goes out to about 50,000 people in the industry. And I think the first one went out on, I think it was the 4th of February in 2013, to about 5 people in the industry. But the idea behind it, and it was kind of very much Jeremy's idea, was that there wasn't a newsletter or some kind of editorial that focused specifically on the mid to high end independent part of this industry. And off the back of doing that newsletter, everything else that we now do kind of spiraled off it. So as well as our newsletter, we do a quarterly print magazine, and obviously we have a website with lots of content and intel on there. And then off the back of doing all that, we came up with our app. And it was this slightly weird situation in restaurants where, well, I always found it quite weird that you could be going to some of the best restaurants in the world, in London, in New York, in Sydney, and weirdly the people cooking the food, or giving the hospitality and looking after you at your table, probably couldn't afford to eat in the restaurant that they work in. And I always found that quite strange. And then, having talked to a few chefs around town and a few restaurateurs, there was this kind of unwritten kind of, like, not secret, but if you went into a restaurant on a Sunday night and you had your pay slip from work saying that you worked in a restaurant or a bar, you could get a nice discount. And we kind of took that idea and cemented it into what Code has basically become, which is a membership for the hospitality industry. And we work with about 450 restaurants across London and Manchester, where they give people in the industry these special offers.
Obviously, everything's different right now, hopefully just temporarily. But can you give us just a reminder of what the industry was like right before COVID?
Rewind 10, 15 years ago, I think London was probably globally not renowned as a very, good place to get restaurant food. I think everyone knows us for our pubs, which are obviously still a very important part of our of society and our landscape. And then obviously, we had our fish and chips, a fry up, etc. But I think, a lot of people would say, London, great city, but not great food. And I think there was I think it was very skewed towards quite formal dining, maybe slightly intimidating, and maybe more towards your kind of special occasion type meals, birthdays, anniversaries, or whatever. And from that kind of, well, it was after the financial crash, so that 2007 2008 time was when it allowed this kind of new wave of informal restaurants that we'd seen a lot in Manhattan open up in London, as I mentioned, places like Polpo that really kind of spearheaded that. And over the past kind of 10 to 12 years, I think our dining scene is probably one of the, if not the best in the world. And there's the huge diversity. You can kind of go for your 3 Michelin star French, right down to some kind of specific Indian type cuisine in a 20 cover restaurant in Soho. And I think that's been, that's what really makes us stand out as a city, is that then we hit the joys of Brexit, which hurts our industry, actually, especially when it comes to people, because it's no secret that especially in London we rely hugely on European and further afield people to come and work in our restaurants and hotels. So Brexit hurt, and then I got the impression, like, probably kind of midway through 2019, we were starting to pick up again, and things were looking good. And I think at the end of last year, with the general election, once that had gone, because those things really impact how people spend money in restaurants and how people dine out. There was this kind of renewed confidence, I think, going into 2020 that it wasn't all going to be such a kind of nightmare, and actually, things were looking okay. And then obviously, mid-March, we had this situation. So yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens, how we get out of this situation.
So it's looking like July is the earliest that most hospitality businesses are going to be able to reopen. What should they be doing now to plan for when they can reopen?
Obviously, it goes without saying that people's health and well-being has to obviously come first, both in terms of customers and staffing. But if the government deem it safe, then that whole 1 meter distancing will make such a difference to how restaurants and pubs and bars can reopen. But I think at the moment everyone is just from pushing the kind of design side of things to one side. I think everyone's just looking at basically, will their offering, or kind of how they ran their restaurants before COVID-19 and the lockdown, are they going to be able to do that in the same way when they reopen? And I think for probably the majority of operators, unless you're kind of talking about the real fast food, kind of grab and go type operators, that you're going to have to tweak what you do. And I think a lot of it is going to come down to, how people order. I've heard lots of people talking about the fact that people are going to look at menus on their phones, or they might be projected onto the walls in restaurants. But sadly, for the moment, getting a physical menu in a restaurant is probably not going to happen. And then also just how you order, if you're ordering it through your phone, because obviously you've got to deal with that, which I think sadly, one of the greatest parts of hospitality is the interaction with your server is going to be limited. So I think it's actually more of the tech side that people are looking at the moment, and how you integrate that into the whole, that whole experience of how people are going to come into the restaurant, get the menu, order, pay, and the whole meet and greet side of things. When you're walking into a restaurant now, the door is going to have to be automatic. People aren't going to want to touch a door handle, and that whole, is there going to be someone at the front desk? Are they going to have to be wearing a mask and all the PPE? So, there's lots to think about, and there's lots to obviously get in place. But I also think, I think we're going to have to see what the kind of, just what society expects.
In terms of businesses set up to succeed based on volume, you've touched on a few ways that they're going to be impacted, like the number of tables they can have in their space. Are there any tips or ideas that you could share as to how high volume business, like a cafe or a pulpo, can transition to keep the revenue up?
There's been talk about actually extending meal times, which obviously restaurants would love, as opposed to just, having your kind of between your 7 and your 9 o'clock for dinner now, that there may actually be a want from customers to, have dinner at 5:30 or 6, as opposed to like that 7:30 type setup that we all kind of, we all want that table at 7:30. So I think the longer meal periods could be interesting, and that could obviously benefit restaurants by getting in more covers that way. I think you can obviously look at changing your menu and your pricing, but I think fundamentally, are you then completely changing your concept and your offering? And I think, as I was mentioning before, it goes back to this whole 2 meter, 1 meter, because I think, the kind of the great small counter dining type restaurants that London has so many of, and that we all love to go and eat at, and we happily queue at. Queues, what's going to happen to that? I think for the moment they're going to probably have to be all done on tech, and you have to join a queue from home or whatever. But all those kind of counter dining places, say they're 25, 30 covers, they need those covers to be full up from 6 o'clock to 10 o'clock every night. And if you're suddenly having to go down to, 12 or 15 covers, I just don't think the maths works, unless you can obviously, you either have to find another arm to your business, be it delivery or something, or you're going to have a very nice landlord who will say, well, we'll work something out on your rent, because that's obviously something that everyone's having to deal with at the moment. So yeah, the 4th of July will be interesting to see who opens, who doesn't, and how people open. And obviously people are looking to different countries at the moment to see what they're doing, places like Switzerland, which is now back open, and Italy, and pockets of America. But it's going to be a huge learning game for everyone.
Do you think that delivery and tech, as well as the food shops that we've opened in our once cafes, restaurants, pubs, bars, including Allpress and Dalston, will those diversifications remain, or will they fade away quickly as things normalize?
I mean, it's so interesting, isn't it? Because there were a huge swathe of restaurants, sort of places that we work with, who would never dream of going on delivery apps and platforms pre-lockdown, pre-COVID. For most people watching this know the kind of obvious reasons that it's hard to control the experience once the food's left your kitchen. A lot of food doesn't travel well. It gets cold. It gets kind of chucked around. And there's also the whole point of, you're sending food out to someone and you're paying quite a large commission on it, and there's very little booze spend when people take delivery. So you'd much rather those people coming into your restaurant and spending the full whack with you. But obviously at the moment they can't do that. So yeah, the whole delivery side has been very interesting and takeaway. And I think it's been, I think it's great to show how agile our industry is, and that people have really, there's been whole new concepts kind of dreamt up overnight by some restaurants. The delivery side is, it wasn't going anywhere anyway, but I definitely think in the short term, it's going to allow restaurants that either may not decide to open straight away, or have customers that might be nervous about coming to their restaurants, still experience their food. It will be interesting to see if they stay on after the kind of, things hopefully get back to an element of normality, whether they carry on. But at the moment, it's one of the only lifelines for restaurants. And then in terms of food shops, it's just saying, you guys at Allpress have done it. I think it will depend case by case on kind of what the offering is, and what the setup is. But I think for something like you guys, it probably makes a lot of sense, especially if you're more neighborhoody. And I think it's been great that you've been seeing a lot more people shop locally and kind of using independent shops as opposed to going to the larger supermarkets and larger chains. I've got no doubt now that when restaurants are being designed, or people are looking at what they're going to do when they reopen, that they'll keep an element of that for sure.
Cool. And finally, what are Code's plans for coming out of lockdown?
We need restaurants, pubs, bars, cafes, hotels to be open and flourishing, and kind of going back to normal. So we obviously, I appreciate that that's going to be unlikely in the short term. So we're looking at how we can tweak our offerings and kind of be agile and pivot to different things. But we're kind of, we're watching very closely as to kind of what restaurants are going to do, which ones are going to reopen, how they're going to reopen, what the offering is going to be. And yeah, we're just going to try and continue to get, to kind of push out interesting content, useful content for our members, and to try and support the industry as much through what has been a very, it's been an awful time for a lot of people, because suddenly, overnight your business, including mine, kind of goes insolvent from something that you have no control over. And yeah, so we'll be dynamic, and we'll try and support the industry as much as we can. But we're kind of at the moment we're kind of waiting to see what's going to happen. And I hope that, we've seen the public's perception change over the past few weeks with lockdown. And I hope by the time restaurants can reopen, and the fact that some shops will have already reopened and schools are going back, maybe some offices, and people will be kind of living a normal life again, that there won't be this, there was a great term that Charlie McVeigh's used called FOGO, so fear of going out. We all had FOMO a few months ago, and we now all have FOGO. So hopefully that element of that kind of, people being very scared about leaving their houses to go out for a bite to eat or to go shopping will have reduced. But we will still have, as an industry, a huge job to do to kind of tell people that, it's safe to come into our restaurants. As an industry anyway, it's probably one of the, that we have to do so much health and safety stuff anyway, as you guys know, running cafes, to kind of open anyway, and be allowed to open. So, but I think that will be a big part of how we as an industry, I think, have to get back, is really that kind of reinforcing the confidence to our customers and to diners and to the public, saying it's okay, restaurants are safe, we're doing all these different things to keep you safe, and if you want to, please do come back and have a meal out.
Adam, thanks so much for joining us for this chat and sharing your insights.
Pleasure. Thank you for having us, Charlie.